Right. Let us now understand what are the two different categories of methods in Java. You can take any method in Java, 100%. I would be able to classify it into one of these two categories here. What is the first category, sir? The first category of methods happens to be such methods which we as programmers have not created it. It is either the Sun Microsystems team that has created these methods, or as we speak today, after 2010, it is going to be the Oracle Corporation team that has created these methods. In simple words, all of these utility methods that are already present in the language, all that we programmers would be doing is we would simply be calling those methods and we would be taking the advantage of those methods. Such methods itself, my friends, are referred to as the predefined methods, library methods, inbuilt methods. And I've also given few examples here. In fact, whenever we have to print any message onto the monitor screen, can you recollect what is the sentence that we would be using? System.out.println. That println is nothing but a method. Similarly, whenever we would like to scan any integer value that is entered through the keyboard to our Java program, it is by using the scanner object. We always call a method called as the nextInt method, scan.nextInt. Scan there happens to be a reference, but what about nextInt? It is a method. Did we write the body for that particular method? 100% no. It comes inbuilt in Java. And going forward, definitely once the strings discussion is going to start, you will realize there is going to be a method called as the index of method. And of course, in most of the inbuilt classes, we have a common method called as the equals method. Moving forward, you will understand what each of these inbuilt methods would be able to accomplish for us as programmers. What about the other category of methods, sir? All of these are such methods that doesn't come inbuilt in Java. We as programmers within our application, we would be defining these methods. We would be creating these methods. Such methods itself, my friends, is referred to as the user-defined methods, custom methods. I've also given few examples here. In our previous classes, I hope all of you are able to remember. These are some of the methods that we have created. Eating method, writing method, adding method, guessNum method. All of these are the methods which we as programmers have created it. I hope all of you have been able to understand both of these two categories of methods. Now please understand, let it be the user-defined method or let it be the inbuilt method. In both of these two categories of methods, there are in total 4 types of methods that you will be able to create. There are going to be 4 flavors of method, 4 variants of method that could be possibly created. What do you mean to say, sir? Please understand, we know in the definition of a method, there are going to be primarily 4 components. Method name, the input to the method, nothing but the parameters, the body of the method, and the output that is going to be returned by the method, nothing but the return type. These are the primary 4 components of a method. Of course, we know in Java there are going to be additional 2 extra components, but I'm talking about only the initial primary 4 components of a method. Now, out of these 4 components, I am going to be using 2 of the components here in order to create 4 different types of method, 4 different variants of method. What do you mean to say, sir? I would consider only 2 aspects here. One happens to be the input to the method and the other happens to be the output that is going to be returned by the method. And all of you know, it is just a simple math question here. Using 2 variables, how many total combinations can be created? Absolutely correct. In total, 4 different combinations can be created. What do you mean to say, sir? Understand the very first type of methods here. The first type of method is going to be such a method that wouldn't accept any kind of an input and it wouldn't also return any type of an output. That means it is going to be a no input, no output method. For example, how would it look like, sir? Maybe if you would consider the same add method as example, this is how it is going to look like. As you can see, within those parentheses, we haven't specified any parameters. That means 100% it is not going to be accepting any type of an input here. And as you can also notice, the return type of the method, since it happens to be void, that means it is very clear this method is not going to return any value. What about the type 2 method, sir? The type 2 method is going to be such a method that wouldn't be accepting any input, but definitely it would be returning some output. This itself is the type 2 method. And how would the signature of the method look like, sir? Maybe for the sake of example, this is how it is going to look like. As you can see, this time also the add method is not going to be accepting any type of arguments here, no input. But after executing the body, it is going to be returning an integer value. Basically, there is some output here. That is why I have specified the return type as int. And I hope by this time you're already able to guess what would be the type 3 and type 4 methods here. This is going to be a type 3 method, which is going to be accepting some input. Also, it is not going to be returning any output here. This itself is going to be the example for a type 3 method here. You can notice here, within the parenthesis here, there are two parameters that I have specified here. That means, as programmers, if we would like to call this add method, compulsorily, we should be sending two integers as input to this particular method. And after executing the body, it is not going to return any output. Hence, the return type here happens to be void. What about the type 4 method, sir? It is going to be such a method which would be accepting both input. At the same time, it would also be returning some output. And what about the example, sir? This is how it is going to look like. Now, the next round of discussion is going to be, for each of these types with a programming example, we have to understand that as to what are these four different types of methods programmatically. Right, it is going to be the very first type of methods, type 1, a method which is not going to be accepting any input, and after executing the body, it wouldn't also be returning any sort of output. But before which, I would like to once again reiterate all of this, whatever I've spoken so far, and try to avoid any sort of misunderstanding, because I see on my screen here, there are two similar terminologies here, classification of methods and types of methods. Let us understand through an example here. Let us assume as a programmer within your application, you are going to be creating a method which happens to be such a method which is not going to be receiving any input. That means you wouldn't have declared any parameters to your method. But after executing the body, it is going to be returning some output. That means there is going to be a certain return type which is other than void. Can you tell me what is such a method going to be called as? Undoubtedly, since you have created it as a programmer, it is going to be called as the user-defined method. But then, while you are trying to define your method, which of these four types have you actually created it? It is a method without any input, but it is also returning some output. That means it is nothing but the type 3 methods. I hope all of you are able to understand. That means basically there can be an inbuilt method that is going to be a type 4 method. There can be a user-defined method that is maybe going to be type 2 method. I hope with these examples you have been able to understand the difference between classification of methods and types of methods here. Clearly, that is how the arrow marks also indicate here. Anyways, now let us quickly start with the type 1 methods here. Methods with no parameters and no return value. Now, please understand the program wherein I would like to create a class within this particular program called as the calculator class. And we know how do we create a class in Java? It is by using that special keyword called as class. And every single class in Java must and should have a name. And the name that we have given to this class happens to be calculator. Next, directly within the calculator class, I would be interested in declaring three integer variables a, b and res. And since these three integer variables have not been declared inside a method, rather they have been declared directly inside a class, such variables are not referred to as local variables, they are referred to as instance variables. And after which, finally, I would like to create a method with no parameters, and it wouldn't be returning any value. That means there is no return value. And how is that method going to look like, sir? This is how it is going to look like. It is not going to be accepting any input, and after executing the body, it is also not going to be returning any output. But what about the body of the method, sir? In the body, this is the simple activity that I would like to do here. Because we know a method can access all of the instance variables that are declared in the enclosing class. Because those variables as well as the add method happens to be the members of the same family. Family here means it is the class, which is nothing but the calculator class. Hence, it can directly access those variables. And how is it accessing the variables a and b here? It is accessing and it is assigning integer values 10 and 20 respectively. then it is simply performing the addition operation and it is storing the result within the variable res, and in the next line it is also displaying the result res onto the output screen. This is all it is with respect to the calculator class. But I know only by having the calculator class, I won't be able to execute the program. To execute the program, we need main method that must also be enclosed within some other class. That is the reason why we would create a class called as the launch class, within which, as you can notice, we have defined our main method here. And now from the main method, I would like to call my add method, because we have understood something very fundamentally about methods and functions, that a method cannot be magically executed. Whenever you want any method to be executed as a programmer, what is that we should be doing? Absolutely correct. We need to call the method. And please understand, since methods in Java represent nothing but behaviors, how can you exhibit the behavior without an object? In simple words, remember this rule. It is a syntax rule, which is in Java, whenever you would like to call a method that is present inside a different class, always compulsorily, first and foremost, you need to create an object of the enclosing class, the class inside which the method is present. Can you please tell me here, inside which class is our add method present here? Absolutely correct. It is present inside the calculator class. So the first thing that I should be doing here is I have to create an object of the calculator class. And how do we create an object of any class in Java? It is by using the new keyword. In other words, this is how we are supposed to do it. But then we know the object creation statement is not yet complete. If you simply create an object and leave it without assigning any reference to it, at the later point of time within your program code, you will not be able to refer back to that same object. That is why I am not ready to do that mistake here. I would immediately assign a reference to the calculator object called as calc, like this. Calc here happens to be a reference of type calculator, which is going to be referring to, it is going to be pointing to the calculator object. And now that the calculator object is ready, using this calculator object reference calc, I would definitely be able to call the add method. And how do we do it, sir? You know how to call a method. It is by using the name of the method. This is how it is going to be done. Now my program is going to be complete. But what happens when the program is being executed, sir? We would like to understand this program from an execution point of view. We would also like to see how the control flow would be moving around this program. As all of us know, the execution, who is going to commence here? It is the JVM. And JVM would always hand over the control of execution to one special method within our program, which is going to be the main method. Since main method is present here, immediately the control is going to be handed over to the main method. And now the control would immediately enter inside the body of the main method. In the first line, object has to be created. Object is created in the memory. Immediately in the next line, the control sees that the programmer here is trying to call a method called as the add method. So what would happen, sir? We know the first thing that should happen now is the control from the call, immediately it is going to be transferred to the method body. And we know that this is where the method body is going to be present. And now that the control has reached the method definition, immediately the control would enter the body of the add method like this. All of those four statements are going to be executed. Addition operation is going to be successfully performed. But sir, we need a proof. The proof here is when the value of the variable res is going to be printed, you will see on the output screen correctly the value 30 is going to be printed. Great, sir. Now that we have executed all these statements within the add method, what happens to that control, sir? The control would simply leave that method and it would come back to wherever it had gone from. Tell me, where did the control come to the add method? It came from the main method. So obviously the control would go back to the main method like this. And once the control has gone back to the main method, now the control sees in the main method also, I don't have any more statements to be executed. So control would once again leave the main method. And now where will the control go back to, sir? Please remember this thumb rule here. Control would always go back to from wherever it had come. and the control came to the main method from JVM. So obviously the control will go back to the JVM. This is how, my friends, type 1 methods are going to be executed. Now, whatever this statement that you see within the program, which happens to be calc.add, this is what we technically refer to as method call or method invocation. But what about this add method that is present inside the calculator class, sir? That is what is technically referred to as method declaration. That means every information about that method is going to be present. That component is what we technically refer to as method declaration. Anyways, it is time that we explore the type 2 methods. The type 2 methods happens to be such methods with no parameters, but this time with a return value. Let us consider the same calculator example once again. This is our calculator class and these are the same 3 instance variables. But this time the add method has to be defined in such a way wherein the return type of the add method this time, definitely it can't be void, because this time the add method must be returning a value. So whatever is the type of the value that the add method would be returning to the caller, that must be specified as the return type of the add method, like this. That means this is going to be such a add method which undoubtedly is not going to be accepting any type of input here, but after executing the body, definitely it is going to be returning an integer value as the output to the caller. But what about the body of the method, sir? The body here, 90% it is going to remain the same. Except the fact this time the developer of the calculator class has decided that I would be willing to perform only the addition operation. I don't want the headache of printing the result onto the output screen. I would compute the result, I would give the result to the caller. It is up to the caller. Whatever the caller wants to do with the returned value, with the result of addition operation, it is up to him. That means the add method now, it must take the value of the variable res, which is holding the result of the addition operation here, and it must return to the caller, whoever would be calling the add method. And how can we achieve that, sir? Like I have said it previously also, both in C as well as in Java, in fact in most of the programming languages, whenever a method or a function must return a value to the caller, we have to use a special keyword called as the return keyword. It is by using the return keyword we will be able to return the value of a specific variable like this. Now if you would say return res, what it means is return whatever value would be there in the variable res. This is how my calculator class is going to look like. What about the launch class and the main method, sir? This is how it is going to look like. For the sake of execution, we definitely need our main method. Now within the main method, if I am interested in calling the add method, you know what is the prerequisite in Java? First and foremost, we need to create an object of the enclosing class. And the enclosing class in this case for the add method happens to be the calculator class. So this is how we have to create an object of the calculator class. And once the object has been created, using that object reference calc, I will have to call the add method like this. Now, if this is how the current state of my program is going to look like, and with this state, if I would immediately start executing the program, you know, the execution would always commence from JVM by handing over the control of execution to our main method. So that is the first thing that is going to happen. Now immediately JVM is looking out for the main method, and the moment main method is found, the control of execution is going to be handed over to the main method like this. And now the control would immediately come within the body of the main method. In the first line, we are creating an object of the calculator class. Nothing to worry. On the RAM, the object is going to be created. Immediately in the next line, the control sees that the programmer here is trying to call a method called as the add method using the reference calc, which happens to be calculator type. That means definitely the body of the add method would be found inside the calculator class, and immediately the control from this point would be transferred. It would jump and it is going to be transferred to the body of the add method that is present inside the calculator class. Great, sir. Next word, sir. After which now the control would immediately enter the body of the add method and it is going to execute all of the 4 lines. In the first two lines, the assignment operation would be done. In the third statement, addition operation is going to be performed and the result would be stored within the variable res. And in the last line, using the return statement, we are returning the value of the variable res back to the caller here. And please remember this technical fact, whenever return statement is going to be encountered within the body of a method, immediately from the same statement, the control would also exit the method. And where would it go back to, sir? We have already answered this question. It would go back to the calling method. The caller here happens to be main method. And the difference this time, my friends, it is not only the control that is coming back from the add method. Along with the control, we are also returning an integer value here, which happens to be the value of the variable res. In this case, it should definitely be 30 like this. That is why it is my responsibility as the developer of the main method. I have to receive this value. Whenever I want to receive a value, obviously I have to prepare a variable. That is why within my main method, I am going to store the value, whatever add method is going to return to me within a variable called as sum. And since add method is going to return an integer value, it is simply common sense. I have to declare a variable which is going to be of integer type. Hence, it is this variable sum which is going to receive the result of the addition operation, which is nothing but 30. And all that I would like to do within the main method in the next line is simply display the value of the variable sum onto the output screen. And when this print statement is going to be executed, immediately on the output screen, we should be able to see the output as 30 like this. And now the control immediately realizes that there are no more statements within the main method to be executed. Hence, control would leave the main method, and once it exits the main method, it should definitely get back to the JVM. I hope all of you have been able to understand as to how type 2 methods are going to be executed, and most importantly, how can we return a value as output from a method back to the calling method. Sir, what is this calling method here? Since you know in this example, it is main method that is calling the add method. That is why your main method is going to be called as the calling method. And add method is going to be called as the called method. Anyways, it is time that we have to take up the type 3 method and understand. Now, type 3 methods are going to be such methods which would definitely be receiving some input from the caller, but after executing the body, they wouldn't be returning any value as output back to the caller. In other words, these are methods with parameters, but there is not going to be any return value. Let us understand the same through the same calculator program here. This is our calculator class. And this time I have decided to declare just one instance variable called as result. And what about the input variable, sir? Do not worry about it. This time that would be automatically be taken care by the parameters here. What do you mean to say, sir? Please observe this. This is how I would like to define my add method this time. If you carefully observe, this time in the signature of the add method itself, we have specified that the add method is going to be receiving two integer values as input. And whatever integer values will be sent as input to the add method, those integer values are going to be collected by these two integer parameters called as x and y. In simple words, the add method via the parameters, it has applied a condition on the caller. If anybody would like to call the add method, mandatorily, compulsorily, they will have to provide two integer values as input. Only and only then the add method will be able to accept the call and it will be able to execute its body. Anyways, at the same time, if you observe the return type here, the return type here happens to be void. It indicates that after executing the body, the add method is not interested in returning any sort of a value. But what about the body of the add method, sir? Whatever integer values that are going to be coming as input to my method, which are going to be stored within the parameter variables x and y, on the same integer values, I would like to perform the addition operation and the result would be stored within the variable res, and immediately in the next line itself, as you can notice here, I would be interested in printing the value of the result res onto the output screen. This is how the calculator class is going to look like. But to execute the program, we definitely need the main method, which is going to be placed within the launch class. Now within the main method, if I would like to call the add method, you know the rule here. Firstly, we have to create an object of the enclosing class, which is nothing but the calculator object. And now using the calculator object reference calc, if I would definitely call the add method like this, please understand immediately in this particular line, there would be a compilation error that would be generated. Why, sir? Because clearly there is no add method present inside the calculator class that is accepting 0 parameters. In fact, the kind of add method that we have inside the calculator class, it is going to be accepting 2 integer parameters. Then while you are calling also, it is going to be a rule that is going to be enforced on you that compulsorily you should also be sending 2 integer values as input. Only then the call and the body are going to be binded together. That is the reason why within the main method, before I make this call, very smartly, I would have created 2 integer variables a and b like this. And within those 2 integer variables, I would be storing the integer values 10 and 20 respectively. And now that I have got 2 integer values within my program, which are stored within the variables a and b, I would simply pass the values of these two variables a and b to the add method. And how can that be done, sir? Look at the call everyone here. This time it is going to be calc.add of a comma b like this. It simply means while we are calling the add method, also please send the integer values that are present in the variables a and b. Now is the call valid, sir? 100% yes, because the body was expecting 2 integers that should be sent as input, and also while I'm calling, I am also sending 2 integer values as input. Definitely the call and the body are going to be binded with each other at the time of execution. Anyways, this is how the type 3 method program is going to look like. Now let us immediately execute the program. The execution would start from the JVM by handing over the control of execution to the main method like this. And immediately now the control would enter the body of the main method. The first 3 lines are going to be executed, and this is going to be the critical statement here, where there is a method call that has been encountered. Immediately, the moment whenever a method call is going to be encountered, from that point the control would jump to find the body of the method, and this is where the body of the add method has been placed. And this time, this is where the difference is. It is not only the control that is going to be transferred to the method definition. Along with the control, we are also sending the values of the variables a and b, which is nothing but 10 and 20 like this. That is the reason why already in the method definition, 2 parameter variables are readily available to receive these 2 integer values. That means now, even before the control would enter the body of the add method, the parameter variables x and y are going to first collect the integer values 10 and 20 respectively. In the same order, the arguments are going to be collected by the parameters. And once the parameters have successfully received the values, now the control would enter the body of the add method. And just in case if you're wondering what type of variables x and y are, we know they're parameter variables, but are they instance variables or local variables? It's very simple. Since these two variables have been declared within the scope of a method called as the add method, 100% they are going to be treated as local variables. Anyways, inside the body of the method, in the very first line, the addition operation is going to be performed. We are trying to add whatever is going to be there in x and y. And what is present in x and y? The values 10 and 20, whatever I had sent to the add method. And the result 30 is going to be stored within the variable res. And in the next line, we are also trying to display the value of the variable res, which happens to be 30. Hence, the same thing should also be seen on the output screen like this. Now that the add method has been successfully executed, the control would exit the add method and immediately it would come back to the calling method here, which is nothing but the main method. But think and answer. This time, are we returning any value as output from the add method? 100% no. I hope now through this example, all of you are able to make out the difference here. There is a huge difference between printing something and returning something. Print is just a print statement using which you will be able to display some value onto the output screen. But are you going to take some value? Are you going to return some value to the caller? Definitely no. Anyways, now that the control has come back to the main method, and after executing this method call, there are no more statements within the main method. Immediately, control leaves the main method and it gets back to the JVM like this. This, my friends, happens to be the type 3 methods. Now please observe this. The variables x and y, which are the parameter variables present in the method definition, are technically referred to as formal parameters, or in general, sometimes simply they are going to be referred to as parameters. But then come back to the call here. While you are calling, whatever values you are trying to send, if in case you happen to send those values in the form of variables, like in this example, in that case, they are referred to as actual parameters, or sometimes they're simply going to be referred to as arguments. I know some of you might have this question, sir, is it compulsory that we should always store the values within the variables a and b? Only then we have to be sending it to the method definition? 100% no. It is going to be your choice. If you want, you can store the value within the variables. Then those variable values can be transferred like we have done in this example. Or if you would like to directly specify the values, calc.add of 10, 20, that would also work. Anyways, it is time that we have to explore the last type of methods, the type 4 methods. Right, so finally the time has arrived that we should be discussing the last type of methods. The type 4 methods are going to be such methods with both parameters as well as a return value. Let us quickly understand the same with the same programming example here, which is the calculator program. This is our calculator class, and as usual, just like the previous example, I would be interested in declaring just one instance variable called as result like this. And after which, now comes our add method, which should have both parameters as well as a return value. That means, how would the signature of the add method look like, sir? This is how it is going to look like. And by looking at the signature, it is crystal clear to all of us that the add method is going to be receiving two integer values as input, which would be collected by those two integer variables x and y, which are nothing but parameters. And by looking at the return type, it is also clear to us that after executing the body, it is going to be returning an integer value as output to the caller. But how about the body, sir? In the body, the first statement would be simply to perform the addition operation between the integer values that would be present within the variables x and y, and the result would be stored within the result variable res. And in the next line, this time, as all of you know, in the type 4 methods, I'm not interested in printing the result inside the add method. I would want to simply return that result to the caller, and that can be accomplished by using the return statement like this. Very subtle and simple example with respect to type 4 methods. Great, sir, but if we also have to execute the program, definitely we need main method that is going to be enclosed within our launch class. And from the main method, if at all I have to call the add method, the prerequisite here is I would definitely need the object of the calculator class, and that is what is going to be done. And after which, before I call the add method, as all of you know, since the add method here is going to be expecting two integer values that should be passed to it while the method is being called, hence I have taken a precautionary measure here and have already prepared those two integer values which are being stored within the integer variables a and b respectively. Now, are we great to call the add method, sir? Absolutely yes. I would go ahead and this is how I would be calling the add method. And as all of you can notice, while I'm calling the add method, I'm also sending those two integer values 10 and 20 which are stored within the variables a and b. I know all of you would also tell me, sir, the add method after executing the body, it is also going to return some output to user which happens to be an integer value here that we can easily make out by looking at the return type of the add method. That is why I would once again prepare the framework here. Whatever integer value the add method is going to come back with after executing the body, I would be willing to collect it within an integer variable called as sum like this. And finally, whatever is there in the variable sum, which is the result of the addition operation, I would simply print it onto the output screen. This is how the type 4 methods program is going to look like. Let us immediately start with the execution here. We know the execution is going to start from the JVM. JVM would immediately hand over the control of execution to the main method. Control would come inside the body of the main method. The first three lines are executed. Nothing great would happen. And in this line where we are calling the add method, immediately the control would be transferred to the method definition, nothing but the body of the method. But once again, this time it is not only the control that is going to be transferred. Since we are also passing some input to the method, those input values along with the control would also be sent to the method definition. Now, once the control reaches the method, the first thing that is going to happen is the parameter variables x and y are going to first collect the integer values, the input in the same order. That means x would be holding the value 10, y would be holding the value 20. Once the parameters have received the integer values which are being sent as input, now the control would immediately enter the body of the method. In the first line, addition operation has been successfully performed and the result is present within the variable res. Now in the second statement, please understand this. The moment return statement is encountered, the first thing that would happen is immediately the control from that particular point would immediately exit the method like this. And it is not only the control that is being returned back to the caller. We are telling return with the value that is present within the variable res. And we know whenever you would add 10 and 20, the result is going to be 30. It is with that value 30, the control would come back to the caller here, which is nothing but our main method. And it is this value 30. In my main method, I would be receiving it within the variable sum. And whatever is going to be there in the sum, immediately once the next line is going to be executed, the same thing is going to be displayed onto the output screen like this. And now that all of these statements, both within the add method as well as within my main method, have been executed, this indicates that the program has been successfully executed. The program should be terminated immediately, for which the control would get back to the JVM. This is how type 4 methods are going to be executed. And one important point to note here is, I have already mentioned it here, whenever a return statement is going to be encountered, immediately from the same point, it doesn't matter if below that return statement, if you have got 1000 lines of code or 10,000 lines of code, it doesn't really matter, because control would never ever get back and execute those statements. The moment return statement is encountered, immediately from the same point, control would leave the method and it would go back to the caller. This is the beauty of the return statement. And please also do remember, using the return statement, we will be able to return always just a single value. Because if you notice here, the add method is able to receive two values as input, but how many values is it going to be returning? Just a single value. This happens to be the limitation of the return statement. But sir, what if in case I would like to return multiple values? You will not be able to do it by using such simple primitive variables. In that case, either you have to store those values within an array data structure or some of the other collection class objects, and those objects is what you should be returning back to the caller. Anyways, all of those set of examples moving forward, once the complexity of the course would increase, definitely we are going to be exploring. Alright then everyone, with this, everything about methods we have been able to completely discuss and understand. Nothing beyond this would be asked in your interviews with respect to this topic called as methods in Java. Lastly, I would request all of my learners to ensure proper notes are going to be maintained and make sure on a daily basis revision is also going to be done. I shall see you all in the next session.